Hi, I'm John Michael Howson, and you're listening to my interview with Elaine Goodman on Gogoodman.com.au.
Hi, everybody.
Does everybody know what time it is?
It's go time!
Radio is theatre of the mind.
When I started, I used to do Frank Spencer of all people. You know, like,
Really?
"Oh, I didn't think I'd make it here tonight." I was driving in my little car.
Got the career out of it. 18 years on, here I am.
On the Elaine Gogoodman show, yeah.
You really have made it.
Now, Ralph, I can rattle off a ton of them. There's the leprechaun. You don't need to burn things. I'm Idaho. When I grow up, I want to be a principal or a caterpillar.
Go Goodman. Go Goodman.
Go, Goodman.
Hey man, this is Austin St. John. I played Jason, the original Red Ranger.
Hi, I'm Karen Parsons. I played Marie Banks on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Hey, what's up? This is Drake Bell, a.k.a. Drake Parsons, Drake and Josh.
Hi, I'm Marcia Monroe. You might know me from episodes.
Yibba yibba to folks, this is Rex Hunt. I love all things fishing and football.
Hey, this is Nancy Cartwright. You might recognize me as, hi, I'm Bart Simpson. Who the hell are you?
I'm not asking you, I'm telling you. Listen to the Elaine Go Goodman Show.
The Elaine Go Goodman Show.
The Elaine Go Goodman Show.
With Elaine Goodman.
With Elaine Goodman.
You're listening to Elaine Goodman.
You're listening to Elaine Goodman.
Because it's a good show.
Woohoo!
Good afternoon and welcome to the Elaine Gogoodman show on 88.3 Southern FM. What a great show we have for you today. Sitting opposite me is radio legend and media royalty John Michael Howson. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that right after this. Welcome to the Elaine Gogoodman show on this, the 5th of July. That's right, yeah. Sunday, the 5th of July. And sitting opposite me, that voice you just heard, is John Michael Howson. Let me go through a bit of his resume. 50 plus years in the media. He's worked in Britain. He's worked in America. He told me face to face he's worked with Joan Rivers, and we'll ask him about that a little bit later. But we're going to start from the beginning, well, close to the beginning. John Michael, welcome to the Elaine Gogoodman show.
Thanks, Elaine, and I must say congratulations on an incredible opening. My goodness me, that is probably the most exciting opening I've heard in years. Right.
That's what I try and do. I try and merge a little bit of FM with a little bit of AM.
Well, I'll tell you a little story. Many years ago, I was great friends with a comedian actress who's now forgotten, unfortunately, by many. Her name was Mary Hardy, but she was a legend in Melbourne radio and theatre and whatever. And Mary said to me, when you walk out on a television set, make sure everybody looks at you. Go on, make any sort of noise, do anything. So I came up with a gimmick of walking on with a bottle of champagne, and I had a signature saying, hello, girls, hello, fellas. But I tell you, she was right. People were compelled to look at you. And just, you can't sneak on. You've got to make an entrance.
Now, I want to start close to the beginning. You started off your career after you finished school all the way out in Mildura with Mildura's Sunraysia Daily. What were your career aspirations? You were a cadet journalist, a cadet reporter back then. What were your aspirations, and did you have a career in the media in mind?
Well, I loved writing for a start. My grandfather had been editor of that paper many years before, and he got me the job. I was actually on my way to Melbourne to do a television course at RMIT. But I got hooked in the wonderful world of newspapers and did everything. I started off doing river levels, how high the Murray River was, who won the local church tennis tournaments or whatever. And then I got into a bit of court reporting and writing copy for the local radio station. And my first celebrity interview was with Chips Rafferty, a renowned Australian movie star of the time, an incredibly interesting man. And that was it. And then I came to Melbourne and worked in the ABC newsroom, and that was interesting. I would never want to darken the doors of the ABC newsroom again. I hated it. It was a miserable place. But no, that one thing led to another. I have a theory, Elaine. Follow the yellow brick road. You never know where it'll take you. And coming to Melbourne, I got involved in what existed then with these, what they call review theatres. They were small, maybe 200, 300 seat theatres, and they were everywhere. There were about half a dozen of them. And you wrote sketches and comedy songs and whatever. They had changes of programs all the time. So if something came out in the paper today, you'd have a sketch in the show that night, the same thing. And that really honed my theatrical skills doing that. Not only the fact that I was writing creatively for the theatre, but also I was meeting a lot of wonderful people who worked in the theatre. So I decided that people used to say to me, oh, your comedy stuff, it's great. So I went off to England to actually do that. Instead, I got waylaid into writing for a magazine, a fashion magazine. But I did write for a lot of comedians. I used to go around and watch comedians working in pubs and clubs, and I'd say to them afterwards, if you want me to write some lines for you, and is there any good? And they'd pay me so much, a line or a joke. And I worked with some incredible people. I wrote some stuff for a wonderful television show called That Was the Week That Was, hosted by David Frost. Comedians that were not that well known here, but certainly became legendary in England. I wrote comedy jokes for them and whatever, and did that as I worked the wonderful gilded world, champagne-filled world of the fashion industry. And then I came back here, created a couple of kids shows for Channel 10. One was for Channel 10 called Magic Circle Club, and then that segued into the ABC, a show called Adventure Island, and I won a heap of Logies for all of that. And as I said, follow the yellow brick road. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Well, you basically covered all my questions. Thanks for coming to know. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, it is. I've told this story before.
Yeah, it sounds familiar. If we go back to your Mildura days, you said you tried a little bit of everything. You tried court reporting, you did sports reporting. Was getting that experience to cover all different kinds of news
I'll tell you,
big advantage?
Absolutely. Look, you see, one of the sad things that's happened in Australia, guys like you who want to do radio would find a job in a country radio station. And that's where Mike Walsh started. That's where John Laws started. That's where many of our top radio people.
Even if you look at FM, that's where Fifi Bucks
they
started.
came out of their country radio stations. Yeah. And Greg Evans, he was king of country radio for a while. But no, people came out of country radio. Unfortunately, the country radio stations barely exist now. They may do a local breakfast show, but basically they're syndicated. They come out of one big central studio, the one group in Griffith, I think, and another one I think is up Moree Way. Anyway, there's no local country radio stations, which means that young people that want to get into the radio industry, where do they go? And it's the same with country newspapers. See, it's all very well going off and doing a degree, what do they call it, a media.
I did screen and media.
All of that stuff. Yeah. But you can't beat working in a newsroom. That's where the action is. And particularly with a very tough editor. Because I had a tough editor, somebody who became a great friend, unfortunately, and he passed away, but he became a great friend. And he was tough on me. And I don't think you can beat getting that practical experience. All very nice going off and doing media courses. I don't quite know what you learn in a media course, but it's nothing like being, if you could, get in local radio or certainly a country newspaper.
Well, I can tell you from experience, when I did my media course, probably the biggest thing I gained from studying for a year and a half and getting my diploma was editing skills.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing better than learning how to talk by actually talking on the air and talking to people who are more experienced like yourself. Like, I've interviewed Rex Hunt and a lot of different people like that. I've had Russell Gilbert in the studio.
Yes.
Doing the research and looking at him straight in the eye and asking him about his life. That's the greatest experience you can have.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. Practical experience. And I often wonder if... where all that happened. Look, it was a tough world. When I worked at the ABC, I was on early morning. I was up every morning for, a couple of years at least. I was up every morning at 4 o'clock to go in and do breakfast, the news stuff for the breakfast. It was hard. You never look for an easy life. It was very tough, but I loved it because you learnt an awful lot and you met some wonderful characters. I work with journalists who are obviously grown. I was a teenager, late teens and early 20s, but I worked with guys who'd been around a lot of blocks, and they taught me a lot of experience of about the hard knocks of the business. And most of them have gone to heaven now, but I often think of them all the time of what they taught me. In fact, Gough Whitlam's speechwriter, who is still with us, Graham Freudenberg, I work with him at the Sunraysia Daily. Graham was a very wise man. It was wonderful.
What was the transition from country journalism to the world, as you mentioned, of theatre in one of the biggest theatre, havens in the world, Melbourne?
Well, no, it's not.
No, not quite?
No. There's a lot of myths about Melbourne. Yeah. The biggest is this is the best. That's a lovely city. I love living in it. But people create a lot of myths. It's a very good, compared to anywhere else in Australia, there's a lot of theatres, thank God, and there's some wonderful theatre. But there are a lot of places that have. Vienna has a population, I think, smaller than Melbourne's. It's got 26 live theatres, going full blast. So, yes, we have our share of theatre. We have wonderful talent here. But when I got into, I think the theatre back when I started, as I said, we had all these little holes in the wall that people wrote for and performed for, and no subsidies, no government grants. You did it. In fact, we opened our own theatre in St Kilda. In Blanche Street, St Kilda, there was what they called an A&A hall, and we rented it, and we used to put on shows there. I think it ran Thursday, Friday, Saturdays. Everything in Melbourne was closed on a Sunday, of course. So it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and we changed the program regularly. We never made any money, but we never lost any money. Now, of course, what happens before you do that, you now work out how you can get a grant. Nobody wants to use their own money or initiative. They want a grant.
Yeah. So you got to try and swing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in the late 50s, early 60s, you moved to London, as you said, to write for a men's fashion magazine, but you also kept script writing for various comedy shows, which led to the gig with the top British TV show That Was the Week That Was.
With David Frost. And interesting enough with David Frost, who was a huge star. Of course, you saw the film Frost-Nixon, whatever. He was a legend. The thing about David, who unfortunately died much too young, he never forgot your name. And years would go by and wouldn't see him, suddenly run into him somewhere, and he'd come over and I knew your name immediately and what you'd done. He was quite an incredible man. But you can't beat that sort of experience, and also the pleasure of doing it, the sheer pleasure of working with top talent is great.
On paper, your career up to then seemed pretty smooth, the transitions from journalism to theatre and then to writing for one of the biggest shows in London. Was that the case? Was it as smooth sailing as it sounded?
Nothing smooth in this business. You have to have initiative, you have to get out there. When I went to see comedians working in various pubs and clubs around London, they didn't know me from Adam. And I had to have more front than Myers to go up and say, listen, I think I could write some good jokes for you. Some of them told me what to do. Others were really receptive. And they didn't use the jokes if they didn't like them. If they did, they paid me so much for a joke. And, that kept I was earning money okay working for the fashion magazine, but it took me into another world. And in fact, after years of sort of struggling to get a top agent or get into a writer's group, as I was leaving London, I got a a call from a couple of guys called Galton and Simpson who could created umpteen top television shows. And they said, we've seen some of your stuff. It's very funny. Would you come and work for us? Well, this was like winning the lotto, except I had promised my mother I was coming home. And if I'd have said, no, Mum, I'm not coming home, it would have probably broken her heart. But then things work in mysterious ways because I was only back a little while and Channel 10 was getting on the road, and that's when I got Adventure Island. Oh, not Adventure, Magic Circle Club, and that led to Adventure Island, whatever. So coming home it wasn't like I missed out on anything. I created other things.
You mentioned like you were big in the comedy writing industry. Where did your background in comedy come from? Because you were, I guess,
from a very funny family.
A very funny family?
Yeah.
And
I had a father and an uncle they didn't know they were that funny, but they were hilarious. And my cousin, I have a first cousin, Frank Howson, and we've just written the Dream Lover, the musical about Bobby Darin, and we've just finished writing a musical about Billy Thorpe. And Frank and myself laugh all the time because he's his father's son and I'm my father's son. And that comedy, that sense of humour has moved through from one generation to another. But it was a funny family. And also I think one of the things about writing comedy, you must know how to tag it. See, one of the things, I love the Pythons, but if you watch a Monty Python thing, the jokes never reach to a comedy tag. It just sort of peters out. And I thought, this is just me. But Michael Palin came out recently and said, our comedy was very strange. It never had any ending to it. They just were funny, but there wasn't a tag. Well, I'm one of those people who believes you have to write to a tag, to a really funny boom boom ending. And I geared myself as I wrote comedy to never start writing anything if you didn't have the ending.
Now, if we move back to That Was the Week, that was the first satirical news program in London. There are a lot that are similar today. You've got John Oliver over in America. Charlie Pickering's got his own one here. Was that where the satirical view on news kind of started?
Yeah. A wonderful old writer called Fred Parsons. He wrote for Graham Kennedy. Fred said to me many, many years ago, if you can't get a couple of good sketches out of every day's paper, the daily paper, then you're not in the comedy business. If you can't read the paper, I only have to watch the ABC. I roll around laughing, even when they're not supposed to be funny, and which is most of the time. And I think they're hilarious. They set themselves up so beautifully with their brand of BS that I look at it and think these people are hilarious and I don't even know it. I'd love to do a thing about Tony Jones. I think, oh, God, he's such a parody of people.
Anyway, before we get in trouble.
No, we're not going to. No, don't ever think that.
No?
You can say which it's a free country. We have free speech. I loathe the ABC. I think it's a parasitic organisation with people who are grossly overpaid to push their political line. There you go. Free speech. I've said it.
You just can't defame somebody. You can say that as long as you can defend it.
As long as you don't. But I read today. Now this is very funny. I read in the paper today something in the Australian that was totally defamatory, and I thought, now, hello, how did these people print this in the paper? Maybe they did a media course. They didn't know what you can say and what you can't say. So there are things you can say. And unfortunately, because of political correctness, we are now finding we live in an era where we've got to bite our tongues all the time. We're not allowed to say things we feel or think because, we might offend somebody. Well, tough, be offended. I've been offended a million times. It goes with the territory.
So back to That Was the Week, that was. So that was kind of the original satirical look on
Yeah,
the
it was. It was. I only wrote a few sketches and things for it, but yeah, it was. It was the first big British satirical television show, and it was compulsory viewing. Later on in Australia, I wrote for Mavis Bramston. You may have heard of the Mavis Bramston show.
I saw it in my research.
Yeah, well, the Mavis Bramston show was pretty satirical too. They're talking about getting into trouble. I got in trouble with that because I wrote a few sketches that made headlines in the paper. But what a wonderful cast. Gordon Chater was a genius comedian, right? Barry Creighton he's just got a big award in America, actually, for writing something or other. Barry Creighton, Carol Ray, what a great cast. And they were truly, truly funny people. You know, Australia was very interesting. There isn't a show, mainly because television has changed so much. But on a Saturday night at 8:30, I think it came on, Australia, you could guarantee that 90% of people watching television were watching that. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go to a quick sponsorship announcement break, and we will be back with more of John Michael Howson. Got plenty more questions and a lot more stories to tell. Right after this, you're listening to the Elaine Gogoodman Show. It's 21 minutes past 2. Welcome back to the Elaine Gogoodman Show on 88.3 Southern FM. We still have John Michael Howson in the studio, radio royalty here in Australia.
Oh, no. Joe, no, I wish I was. No, I'm just, you know what I call myself, Elaine?
Uh-oh.
The flotsam and jetsam of the entertainment business.
The what and the what?
The flotsam and jetsam, that's what I am. That's, you know, but I'd love to be radio royalty and make the money that radio royalty makes.
In 1964, you moved back to Melbourne from London, and as you mentioned, you got into kids television. You created shows The Magic Circle Club and Adventure Island. You contributed more scripts to Graham Kennedy's In Melbourne Tonight.
No, it wasn't. It was the Graham Kennedy Show.
The Graham Kennedy
Graham
Show.
Kennedy in Melbourne Tonight was before. I mean, I'm not that old, but it was the Graham Kennedy Show, and I wrote sketches for that show. And then when Graham made a comeback to radio with the old 3DB, forgotten by everybody, and he asked for me to write the radio show for him. That was a singular honour because he was very clever. What you did with Graham, you gave him a series of lines and building to a tagline. And he may take the whole time of the radio show to tell the joke. He'd weave it in and out of commercials and music, and he'd say things as I was saying, you know, they'd move about, and he'd pick up the story and continue, then he'd go on to something else. He was a remarkable talent. Very few people ever knew him. He was a very private man and not a gregarious person. He liked his company was always very select and very private. So I got to know him somewhat, but I don't say I really ever knew Graham. He had a very tight group of confidants.
So you were writing, as I say, with Graham Kennedy as well. At this point, though, you'd been writing scripts for British television, Australian television, stage, and you'd been a journalist for various outlets over in London. Did you ever struggle for original material? You'd been writing so much for so many different sources. What was your key to, as I said, being original?
Freddie Parsons said, if you can't find something funny in the paper today, give it up. I think it just comes to you. You see something, you think that's ridiculous or that's hilarious, and you just, that's what it is. No, it shouldn't be a struggle. You just should bounce out of the papers that is funny and an hysterical story. So that's what I was inspired by, just finding funny things in the news.
Do you think that comes more from your journalistic background or more from your comedy background?
No, because of the family.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, you just see but if you look at the paper, how many idiotic things. I mean, I'll tell you the greatest joke in the world is Osama. What's his name? President Obama.
Obama
I don't believe this guy is president of the United States. If you can't get a joke out of him every day, you don't give it up.
And you mentioned this just a second ago, your impression of Graham Kennedy. He was a very private man, but he was a genius when he got on stage.
He came alive when the red light went on in the camera. That's when Graham really lived. I always said he lived about 2 hours a day, and that's when he was on television. The rest of the time he was very quiet, very private, whatever. But the moment he was on, he was really on. And mind you, other people like that. Johnny Carson was apparently like that as well. That when they're on, but when the light's off, they're very private, very quiet, very introverted.
I mean, when you look at some comedians today are like that, but you've also got a handful of people like your Hughesies and your Peter Helliers that if you see them out and about, they're happy to take a photo, happy to have a joke. And I met Peter Hellier at LA Airport, and he'd just come off a plane and he was tired as anything, and he was still happy to have a photo.
Do you know something? That's the proof of a performer. We don't make ourselves famous. Nobody makes themselves famous. The audience makes them famous. The audience goes to see their movies or the play they're in or their cabaret act or their concert, whatever it may be. So, or they buy the books that somebody writes. So I get very annoyed when I hear about people snubbing their audience. You know, I'll tell you a little story. Many years ago, I knew the late, great movie star Rock Hudson. And Rock came to Melbourne and I entertained him. And we went to the Florentino restaurant for dinner. And there was 8 people at the table, and people were coming up all through the meal asking for an autograph. And he graciously signed every autograph, very on a personal, what's your name? And, you know, they were thrilled. And somebody at the table said, don't you ever get sick of that? He said, not for a minute, because if it wasn't for those people, I'd still be driving a truck.
It's true, though.
It is true.
A lot of people don't appreciate that, but it is true. Now,
a well-known Australian actress who'd been working in the United States and doing quite well came back to Melbourne and was quoted in the press that she got very annoyed that while she was having a cup of coffee around St Kilda, people came up and asked for her autograph. Actually, they intrude on my space. And I said, you don't have any space when you're in people's living rooms. When you're part of their lives, you don't have any space.
So there's no line once you... there's no line.
No, you have to say, people come up, and as long as they're polite and nice, you say you thank people profusely for taking the time and having the interest in you. So there you go. Now, if you were sitting at home and they knocked on your door and walked into your living room, that's different. But when you're out and about and in the public eye, because after all, I don't know anybody who has made it successfully who doesn't want to be in the public eye. I mean, that's the only route. Give me a break. You want to be a famous star, but no, you don't want anybody to know you. It's crazy. So I got very annoyed at that because people often, it takes a little bit of courage sometimes to go up and ask someone for an autograph. So you have to be courageous. You have to be polite back. Politeness doesn't cost anything.
It takes courage and guts to invite someone into my radio studio that's had so much experience and has had so many
I'm top marks to you, Elaine. Top marks to you. But, you know, there was this world-famous star, as I said, with Rock Hudson. And, in fact, I've been in the company of many other famous stars, and people have come up and asked for an autograph, and they're always very gracious. I've never, ever been in the company of somebody who told anyone to surf, you know. They've been really, really nice. And I'm talking about people like Michael Caine and Roger Moore and a lot of big, big stars, Julie Walters, Cilla Black, you name them. Always lovely to their fans.
Back then and through the 70s and 80s in Australia, it seemed we had a lot of what was called a variety show.
Yeah.
What was, and even leading on to my generation with Hey Hey It's Saturday, what was the key to a great variety show back then?
Generally the host. Somebody who you really liked having them in the living room. Then a very good team of producers. I mean, I worked on the Mike Walsh Show, which you could say was a daily variety stroke interview show. It was, I mean, I was a regular and on several times a week. And Jeannie Little, God bless her, she was a regular. Jan Adele, Lucky Grills, had a good cast of regulars. But, you know, the strength of the producers, the people in the back room, they were the people who had really a lot of odd bods, very funny, eccentric people. And, of course, it was all held together by Mike. But it was, you walked into that office and it was fun to be there. Although they were very serious people with their work, they were fun people to be with. And I don't know where that went. I mean, there's a lot of people that, I don't know. I just find that was this very special time that you don't make yourself a star. There's a whole lot of people behind you. That you have to have the talent, but you have to have a lot of people to coordinate that. And the Walsh Show had a room full of, or an office full of wonderful people. I don't think they could do that show today.
Well, no, the variety shows kind of died out. I mean, Letterman in his earlier days was kind of a variety show when he calmed down a little bit. But we don't really have variety shows these days. Why do you think it's died out?
Television stations don't want to do them. Why would you do a variety show when you could put The Voice on or the X Factor or the whatever?
Yeah, true.
You know, they don't want to invest the time and the money in a variety show. And you do need to see the Walsh Show and Graham and other shows. They not only had the people like, the talking heads and Mike holding it together, but they had full orchestra. They had dancers, they had singers, they had all. They don't want to pay that money. That's an expensive item. Nobody wants to pay that. Not just here, but in the UK and America as well. They don't want to spend that money on when you can get contestants in a talent show. Why bother hiring professionals?
In the late 70s, early 80s, in America, you spent some time in America. We'll touch on that in a minute. America created a new kind of radio host. We're going to move on to radio now, called a shock jock, and his name was obviously Howard Stern. Is there a difference, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, is there a difference between speaking your mind and being a quote-unquote shock jock?
Well, it's what people perceive to be a shock jock.
Would people perceive you to sometimes be a shock jock?
If you come on and your whole reason for your show is to say outrageous things to make people, get people to be shocked, then you're a shock jock. But if you come up and you have opinions that have been formed because of your experience, and you say that, then you will have some people say, oh, he's a shock jock. But no, it may be that they're voicing their opinion about something that some people don't like. You see, I just love the whole idea of the widescreen. Everybody having a point of view, everybody being excited by their points of view, and being unafraid to offend people. Go out there and say what you believe. We do live, I keep harping on this, we do live in a society built, hopefully, although our speech in Australia is restricted somewhat, but basically we live in a country where we have free speech. Not all the time, but we do.
We're not North Korea, which is...
No, exactly. We're not North Korea. But so many people, they get upset if they hear someone's opinion. I think that's interesting. I mean, there's nothing better than having a good old debate. And you have the freedom to call up and say, I hate what you're saying. It's not like you're shut out. So, no, I think it's absolutely great that people and they're not all shocked. Some people, look, they act on the thing of, as Howard Stern did. I mean, he did that to shock people. But I work with very funny people in America who were marvellously creative and funny, and were not shock jocks, but they said outrageous things, but they weren't there primarily to shock people. They were there to entertain people.
Would you look back on your career, even in the past few years, you've had a couple, one very particular run-in with the station you work at. Would you look back at some of those things and say, yeah, maybe that was a little bit shock jock-esque?
No, because I believe what I said. I didn't do it to shock people. I was doing what I thought was right to do. You can't sit there biting your tongue all the time. And if that was their prerogative to take me off air for whatever time it was, I don't care. Somebody said, what are you going to do on a Sunday morning? I said, go to Mass. See, you're supposed, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Pray.
It's like a drug being in there. I've got no other life but being... No, I just went to Mass. So there you go. But it's just one of those things that if you go to sit there and say, I better not say that. See, I censored myself today. And the reason I said to myself, there's a terrible murder in Adelaide. And, it's been a week of the news and what's been going on. And Nick did it on Friday and he was doing today. And I said, look, I don't know anything about the poor man that got murdered. I don't know anything about his son. I don't know anything about the case. I'm very, very sorry this man was taken. But I'm not going to sit here and air my ignorance and come up with a whole lot of points of view about this terrible tragedy. I think that too many people can't shut up, and they're coming up with all sorts of things. No, be quiet. We don't know. And it was a family tragedy. And in the court, and I must say, I looked at a couple of headlines in papers, including the Australian, and I thought they're not saying that. I mean, they didn't use the word alleged.
Yeah, you have to.
You have to use the word alleged, and they didn't. And I thought, these people are one of the leading, and I love the Australian, one of the leading papers, and they forgot to use the word alleged. See, that's one of the great things we have here to protect the innocent and to protect the guilty from having some sort of media trial. Is you can't go out and say people did things before they've been tried. You have to say allegedly they did this, allegedly they did that. But that protects the person. I would say, from what I've seen in the last few days, that it may be very hard to find a jury that has not been influenced by the media coverage of the last few days.
That's a good point. And how do you overcome that? You can't overcome
I
that.
don't know how they, so in the United States, if something happens like that, they'll often move the trial to another jurisdiction. But you see, this has been a blanket story all over Australia.
Because it's affected the football.
With literally the same thing being said again and again. And I think, well, where are you going to get your unprejudiced jury from? I can't see it.
You have to go to New Zealand.
Yes, have a trial in Tonga.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Too soon? No, it's fine. We have a few moving back to shock jocks. We have a couple in Australia. You could probably count them on less than one hand if you want to say quote unquote shock jocks. Mainly in Sydney. Do you think radio still needs shock jocks?
Yeah.
Or will people switch off if more creative content is available?
No. You know what people want? Be entertained. That's the bottom line.
That is
they
being
want to
shocking
be entertained.
still as entertaining as it was 10, 15 years ago?
I think that's why these people rate their socks off. If they weren't rating, you'd say, oh, well, they're doing the wrong thing. But they have millions of listeners.
So why doesn't everyone do it?
Because some people don't have the talent to do it.
Yeah?
It requires a certain amount of talent, and it also requires a certain amount of knowledge. If you're going to go out there and fire, big guns around the place, you have to have your aim right. So I think, nobody's succeeded. I'll tell you what, in the United States, most people on talk radio, and there's a lot of talk radio, are conservative, right? They rate through the roof. Now, to get balance over the years that I was there, they tried hiring people of the opposite political persuasion. They only lasted a couple of months, if that. Like Mario Cuomo, the ex-governor of New York, and there were Hollywood, a whole lot of people. And they only lasted a couple of months. So you know why? They were boring. They were really boring. They might have been good and noble and wonderful people. I'm not disputing that. But they were boring. They came over with this, we're holier than thou. And he said, oh, shut up. I'm turning you off. And I want to hear somebody yelling and screaming that's funny, that's going to grab me. There are two guys in LA. They're on drive time on a station called KFI 690. They're called Ken and John. Well, Ken and John, I've heard them with having politicians whimpering because they pull no punches. And when pollies do things that are abysmal, they don't get them on if they're very brave to go on. And I've heard them actually quivering. And what their ratings through the roof. So
I need to go more hard hitting with my interviews rather than more interesting and more research.
No, you're finding a way, and that's fine. I mean, it requires somebody these guys have been working together for years, and they are really, really good radio and entertaining radio, but they don't suffer BS. You see, when politicians come on with the usual line of BS, they're well informed enough and tough enough to say that's BS. Come on, tell us. And that's what they do.
Do we get much of that in Australia?
No, not really.
No? Why do you
People
think that
are in awe of politicians for a start.
Yeah, why hasn't the shock jock kind of taken off?
They do in
Melbourne.
Sydney. They do in Sydney.
Yeah,
different cultures, different things. Melbourne is very parish pump radio. The traffic lights aren't working in Hawthorne Road, or there's too many, that's very parish pump. In Sydney, the shock jocks paint a bigger picture. And that's basically what the difference is. You'll hear people calling up top radio people. They haven't come to collect the rubbish bins. Well, call your council. I can't believe some of the things. What do you expect Neil Mitchell to do? Go down and take the rubbish tins for you? Call up your council.
Welcome back to the Elaine Gogoodman Show. We've got John Michael Howson in the studio for just a little bit longer, so we can talk about Joan Rivers and just get a brief outline of his experience from all different corners of the globe. Now, speaking of shock jocks, you spent some time in America hosting a weekly entertainment show with Joan Rivers. I think that was through the 90s.
No, I wasn't hosting. I was a guest on it.
A guest on it?
Yeah. Joan, how did it all happen? I don't know. But, I was doing a show with Gordon Elliott. who from Australia, who I always thought good when I heard him first did his radio show out of 2UE. I thought he was about 40 years of age. But sometimes he'd sound a bit naive. I think that's funny. And then I met him and he was like 20. But he went to the States and he became had his own afternoon show on CBS in syndication, and then he went into the food business. He now has a production company that does food shows. And I think Joan saw me on Gordon's show, and one thing led to another, and she said to me, why don't you come on my show? And so I had to fly from LA to New York, and I did the show about, maybe once every fortnight, sometimes once a week. And it was a syndicated show, meaning it was sold to individual stations around America.
And that's what we're starting to do here in Australia.
Top syndication. It may make a lot of money. Anyway, I did the show, and we got on famously because we had the same sense of humour. She was a comedy genius. But what I loved about her, I'd be doing something about some hideous movie I'd seen, and she always let you get the laugh. She never trod on your laughs. She'd be the first to laugh, and she was wonderful. She'd, that was great, come back next week or whatever. And then one day she called me to a dressing room. She said, darling, I'm not going to do the show anymore. I'm giving it up. And I said, why? It was doing okay. She said, do you know something? Television's so full of intrigue and backstabbing and all this crap. I can't bear it anymore. And she had a line of designer jewellery, which she sold on the shopping channel. She said, I'm making more money out of my beads than I'm making money out of this thing every week. So she walked away from the television show. And then she was doing radio on WOR New York, which is the top talk station in New York. And she used to do, on a Friday, she'd call me every Friday, and I would do a thing about the movies that have opened or were opening and chat, and we'd send up Hollywood unmercifully, and which I loved doing. And she was just the sweetest soul. The last time I saw her was her last visit to Australia, and I don't know why she did all that plastic surgery, because she started to look very strange, but she was a very well-read woman who came from a very good background. She was great. It's a bit like Phyllis Diller. When you met Phyllis Diller, she was a very nice middle-class lady who had a concert pianist. And I was doing an interview with her once, and she was very refined. And my producer said, Phyllis, can you be Phyllis? Because people didn't want this nice lady. So Phyllis thought about it. She went, and did her famous laugh and did a funny interview. But again, it's often people that you meet that are supposed to be raucous or whatever, when, particularly with Lucille Ball. Lucille Ball didn't have that hype. She spoke like that. She had a rather deep voice. That's scary. Yeah, she did. And so it's been an interesting experience, One by one, of course, they're all dropping off the perch, but they were nice to know at the time.
Did you get to see her live as well?
Who, Joan?
Joan Rivers.
Oh,
yeah.
God, yes, in Vegas.
In Vegas.
Yes, she was wonderful. She sometimes used to try her show out in a club in Hollywood, in West Hollywood, not far from where I lived. But then when she did the Vegas gig, I went over several times to see her do the Vegas gig, and she was wonderful. She was rude and crude, but always ladylike. It didn't matter. You didn't go to Joan Rivers if you didn't want to hear her doing her act.
But
you know what I mean?
Was she like that on radio, or she had to clean it up for radio?
No. She was really quiet. She wasn't. It's a different thing to a cabaret when you can really go for broke, and doing a radio show. What if she's very funny on radio show? A radio show and so on with a television show, but not coarse, as we say.
Was that a disadvantage to her, or was she fine like that as well?
She played to her audience. She knew what her audience was, and she knew what they expected and what she had to do and where she had to rein herself in and whatever. And, that was her comic talent. She was a nice little Jewish girl from Long Island, I think, and when she went into the comedy business, she was working in some terrible dives, and her parents were shocked because she had a degree in English literature. And they thought she was going to be a school teacher or something, and there she was working these clubs and doing them, and it's tough. Those clubs are tough.
Now you're on Sunday morning on 3AW every week, and one of the big things that gets on your nerves is the use of technology in everyday society. How has social media changed the media industry, particularly radio?
Do you know something I don't know and I don't care? Because you know what I've learned? I've got a Facebook site which I occasionally use. I don't care. I think, look, I'm too old to worry about it. But if you want to be on texting people all the time, even if you're driving a car, which worries me, or crossing the street, and that's why so many people get knocked over, because they're looking at a machine instead of looking at what's around them. If you want to do that, do it. I just think that it's very strange that people have more love for their gizmos than they have for each other. I don't have to have friends on Facebook. I have plenty of friends I know. And I think it's much nicer to talk to people face to face than send them messages on the gizmo. So, you know, but to each his own. This is the new generation. But I think it will lead to a very impersonal world. And I don't know, and this is a mystery to me, why you have to be on the phone all the time. I mean, can't you wait till you get home and then call? What are you telling people? I mean, I look at people on a tram and they're all, you think, who are you talking to and what are you writing? You know, I don't get it. Well, I don't have to be in touch with people 24 hours a day, every minute of the day. You know, I don't get it. But still, that's the world that they live in and they're welcome to it.
What about in radio? You've been at 3AW since about 2006. How have you seen the way they use social media over the last 10 years? Go on.
I was at 3AW in 1976.
1976?
Yes.
Right, so back when Rex Hunt started
I did every show. Darren James, as I remember, was a schoolboy. And his father, Peter James, hosted a show I was on with Mary Hardy. 1976 I was there. And then I did it all. When I was in America, I used to do Ernie Sigley's show. I came back and I'm doing this thing since 2000. What year was it we started? I can't remember. But it's been number one since we started doing it. We're double anybody, our nearest rivals. And I'm very proud of that. That's great. And we have an enormous listening audience, and I always love it when people come up to me in a supermarket and say, I love you on the radio. That's the biggest compliment. It's like winning a Logie. It's wonderful.
So how have you seen the introduction of social media in such a big radio station, in such a big, well, reasonably big city?
I have to tell you, I don't know, and I don't care.
You don't look behind the scenes?
No. People call me up. If they want to talk to me, they call me up. I'm not interested in all that other stuff. You know, other people can be, but just not my thing. You want to talk to me, call me up. It's very easy. There was this time when Nick, God bless his cotton socks, was obsessed with Twitter. So when we all through the show, when we came to commercial break, Nick would be on the Twitter. And I had to say to him one day, Nick, this is called talk radio, not Twitter radio. And he said, but people are twittering and telling me what they think and whatever. I said, get them to call up. It's a talk radio show. So he doesn't do it anymore. He's given the Twitter away.
He doesn't do it when you're looking.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. He was obsessed with it. Well, you go through a phase.
Yeah.
And you know what's interesting about Twitter? It's like giving a toy to a irresponsible child. How many people have got themselves into shocking trouble because they've twittered something? I mean, you know, you say, no, shut up. You don't have to give it up. What are you doing? You've seen people lose their jobs, people getting sued, all this because of this stupid Twitter.
It's entertaining, isn't it? That's it. That's the entertainment industry.
Well, I suppose it is. If you want to get sued or hated or whatever, attacked, I mean, go ahead and do it. But I've never been under, and there's so few, you can't exactly voice a real opinion, can you? Because you don't have, how many words?
140 characters, that's just Twitter,
140 characters. How can you get profound with 140 characters?
Yeah.
No.
Exactly. You've got to use a lot of profanity.
Yeah.
You've worked in, just quickly to wrap it up, I've got a couple of broader questions. You've worked in Australia, the UK and the USA. What are the big differences in the way the media is presented in each place?
Well, oh God, that America is very freewheeling. I mean, there's something for everybody in America because of the number of TV and radio stations and what newspapers and whatever. Britain is a bit more restricted. In Australia, it's okay here for the size of the country. You can't really knock it. what we've done for 23 million people. But I still think that it's, I'd like to see it be a little bit more raucous, be more entertaining, a little bit more raucous, a little bit less politically correct.
Do you think it will go that way?
No. No. But I would, because that was one of the joys of working on a radio in America. It really, for instance, if you didn't like somebody, you can say, I think so-and-so's a pain in the butt. I mean, people do that all the time. Whereas here they go, don't say, you can't say that. I mean, one of the things that does amuse me is I listen to a radio, obviously, and people say, so-and-so's a wonderful bloke. What a great bloke, so-and-so. Isn't he a great bloke? You know he's a terrible pig. But if they don't say so-and-so's a terrible pig, they say, he's a good, what a wonderful bloke. Everybody's a good bloke. There's not that many good blokes in the world, let me tell you, but everyone's a good bloke. So you said, no, don't think so. Why don't you just say he's a monkey's bum? I mean, why not?
Yeah, I listen to all different radio stations. I listen to 3AW quite a bit, and some of the people that call up picking up Neil on his political incorrectness just gets annoying sometimes.
Well, it is. I don't care what you say because you have the right to say it. But the offence business is two things that are very big now. People being offended. I'm offended. Well, tough, be offended. And the other, you should apologise. No, if you've said it, you've said it. I hate that phony apology stuff. I better say I'm sorry. No, and they're not one iota sorry at all. But the apology business. No, you've said it, live with it. I mean, that's what I said about Donald Trump last week. He said something about, the Mexican thing. He didn't say but America's got a terrible problem at the moment. It really has. But he did mention the crime rate, etc. He could have probably couched his words differently. But they said, you have to apologise. And he said, no, I'm not, because I mean it. And I thought, well, there you go.
And now he's not going to become president because everyone's jumping off him.
You're joking. The figures, his popularity's gone up.
Really? Even though every media outlet has jumped up him?
But you have to understand the American media outlet. They're like vultures. They sit in the branches waiting to have somebody to misspeak. This is the latest word, misspeak. I hate that. When Hillary Clinton lied her head off about Benghazi when she was Secretary of State, they said, she misspoke. That's the new word for lying. Misspoke. So I don't know. Anyway, but his popularity's gone up. Well, people have been wanting to say that, but the media are not going to give him a break because that's, they're so up their own backsides that they, no, seriously. This is one of the sad things I think that has happened today. We live in an era that should be free and we should say what we want to and we should run the gamut of opinions. Instead, we have the media corralling itself into only say what they believe is acceptable. And I met a lot of people in the media who went head over heels about gay marriage who not for 1 minute believed in all that. But it wasn't acceptable to say you don't like it, you don't agree with it, so they all jumped on board the gay marriage bandwagon. I frankly don't care who you marry, when you marry or what you marry. But these people come on, it's like, I better not say this is, I don't agree with this because the people think I'm horrible and nasty. And that's the thing. It was a politically correct thing to go along with. And I think it's very sad that in a time when we should be able to say what we want, do what we want in, politically or with opinions, whatever, we are being corralled by unseen forces who tell us what we should say and what we should think. I mean, that's been great in East Germany, not so great here. In fact, I have a feeling a lot of people in the media would have been very happy in East Germany. I think they would have been quite happy to go to be told what to say and when to say it.
Finally, what do you prefer, radio, TV, print or theatre?
Oh, theatre.
You've done them all.
Well, I've done writing for the theatre, and I've had two major hits, Shout and Dusty, I wrote with David Mitchell, who'll be my producer on the Mike Walsh Show. And now we've got Dream Lover coming up next year, which I wrote with my cousin Frank Howson. And I also have Billy Thorpe, which I love Billy. I knew him in America, great guy. And that's called Billy Thorpe Over the Rainbow. Had a couple of little minor... I had one terrible failure called... what was it called? No Sex Please We're Seniors. That was a dud. And I've had a nice little minor success with a show called Pyjamas in Paradise. And I'm currently working on a play for 3 women. And I hope to have that finished in a few months. And it's 1 set, 3 women, so it has a good chance of getting produced. Yeah,
so you like theatre, and then why do you say radio so strongly over TV and print?
Because you don't have to look your best. You don't have to have a shave before you go on the radio. I love it. No, it's much more intimate medium. You and I are sitting across this table talking to each other. Now, if we were on a television show, there'd be cameras everywhere, there'd be cables everywhere, there'd be floor managers, there'd be all this thing, which is terribly distracting.
And if we stuffed up a line, we'd have to repeat it.
Well, funny enough, I once did a television show in America for the Captain and Tennille. They gave, because I said if you stick around long enough in America, you'll get your own talk show. Everybody was getting talk shows. Anyway, I was on this show with the Captain and Tennille, and I was telling this story, and I had the audience in hysterics, right? Wonderful. But it sort of it went a bit away from the question that the Captain or Tennille had asked me. You know, they stopped it and they edited. We had to go back to square one and come in with some sort of... They're so busy controlling the content that they don't let... I see, years ago that didn't happen. People were just did what they did. But now they're, because of ad breaks or timing or whatever, everything is controlled. And you think, but that's very dull. It shouldn't be. It should be funny. It should be freewheeling. Do you know... There was a wonderful Jerry Seinfeld came out the other week and said this. I thought I gave a round of applause. He said, "You think when I go on David Letterman that this is all just a conversation?" No, I've talked to 5 or 6 producers who have come up with what they want me to say and the story they want me to tell. I don't talk to David. He gets a script saying, ask Jerry about this or ask Jerry. So he said, we're not having a conversation. He said, it's this question and answer thing that's all been written by producers. So he said
I disagree with that. I could not handle being an interviewer like that.
Well, that's how phony it is with a lot of these shows. Nobody gets up and says what they actually think. And Jerry Seinfeld, and I thought, good on you, mate. He blew the whistle. He said, it's all phony. I go in there. He knows. I know what he's going to ask me, and he knows what I'm going to say.
Exactly.
There you go.
And that's why I love radio, that's why I love interviews, and that's why I was looking forward to interviewing you, and you didn't let me down, John Michael. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on the Elaine Gogoodman Show, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. It looks pretty sunny out there. Thank you for making the trip.
I'm going for a walk. Thank you, Elaine. You've been wonderful.